What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Brown Boys TV video. And today we're going to be doing a Brown Boys Talks, which is going to be saltwater fishing versus freshwater fishing. Alright, let's get right into it. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be going over some pros and cons of both, and then I'm going to be explaining which one I like better and why. So let's go ahead and start off with some pros and cons of saltwater fishing. So the first thing is that saltwater fishing has so many different species, right? Like whenever you throw your line out there, it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get, right? So there's snappers, barracudas. There's so many different species that you can pull out versus freshwater, where you have really only a few that you can pull out. So there's like bass, crappie, catfish, and maybe bluegill that will bite, bass type of lures. And, those are pretty much it, but it's mostly just bass fishing. And that's definitely a con for freshwater, but a pro for saltwater. Now, a con for saltwater, which is my biggest reason why I don't really think that saltwater is the best, is because there's no real challenge in it, right? When we were fishing in Florida, which is where I got the majority, all of my saltwater fishing experience, is you would just throw a shrimp out there, right, on a normal, 3/0 J hook, and you hook the shrimp through the back, and you're pulling out different species pretty much every single cast, right? You don't really have to know a bunch of different things. There's no real challenge in comparison to bass fishing, where you have to know the time of day, the time of year, the temperature, the water temperature, the moon cycle, the air pressure. You have to know all these different things, and then you have to pick from a very large selection of baits and lures. You have to know, am I going to use artificial lures? Am I going to use live bait? What type of live bait? What type of artificial lure? Is the water murky? Is it clear? Are these bass spawning? Is it pre-spawn, spawn, or post-spawn? There's so many different things that you have to take into account when you're fishing freshwater versus the saltwater fishing, equivalent of bass is like snapper and that sort of stuff, where you can still throw artificial lures, but if you just throw live baits as a shrimp, you're going to pull out so many different fish that range from different sizes, from EB little snappers and pinfish to massive sharks, like this big. So it's definitely a con in my book, because fishing is not necessarily just catching a fish and not necessarily just catching the biggest fish, but it's also the prepping and everything else that goes into fishing. It's like a hunt. There's no hunt when it comes to saltwater fishing. I mean, there's a little bit, but nowhere near as much as bass. You can spend an hour out there fishing for bass, and you're switching out lures. You're like, man, the spinnerbait didn't work today. I'm going to switch up to a crankbait. And that doesn't work, and then you switch up again. Then once you find that lure and once you get that bite and you hook that fish, it is so much more satisfying than catching, a snapper every single cast with no real thought process going into how you're going to be fishing saltwater. So that's why I think that it's more satisfying when you spend an hour out there and you're trying so hard and you're switching out different baits and you're like, that one didn't work. But once you find that one and once you catch that fish, it's so satisfying and it's perfect, So that's why I have a big problem with saltwater fishing. Now, there is another pro for saltwater fishing versus freshwater fishing. The fish fight way different. They are so much smarter and so much stronger in the ocean, I swear. You would get broken off because the fish that are this big would swim around pillars of docks. They try to swim into the anchor line, and they will break you off like that. They also fight super duper hard. You can have a half-pound snapper fight harder than a 4-pound bass. And to me, that's just like, whoa. I was completely surprised how hard they fought down there. And so, like, that's good. That's good. That does add to the satisfaction of catching a fish and the fun that comes with catching fish. And that's something that you don't really get much of in freshwater fishing, where they're kind of slow and they do their head shakes, but it's pretty easy to take them in because they don't really fight against it, right? All right, and next up, I have two more pros for saltwater fishing, which are one, the size of the fish, and two, the water is so much better. Compared to the lakes and ponds where I live, it's like, completely different. The water in the ocean is crystal, it is blue compared to the chocolate milk that I'm used to fishing at here at home. But the size of the fish, I usually say that the size of the fish doesn't really matter when, like, I can get the same amount of satisfaction. I don't know if it's the same for everyone else, but I feel that if I even catch a half-pound bass after, putting in so much effort and, seeing what the temperature was, the quality of the water, is it clear, is it murky, is it like, the sun out, is it cloudy, all these different factors, and it's changing constantly. Like, you can go to the pond one day fishing freshwater, and it is like, covered in algae, and maybe you want to throw a frog on top of the algae, or maybe you want to fish the side of the algae with like a drop shot, but it's completely different like when it comes to saltwater, and you just, not coming to that much of a challenge, but you hook a bigger fish. It can sometimes equal out when you're having to fight this big fish that could be, 10 pounds, and, still compared to bass fishing of a 2-pound bass, right? So, like, I feel that it is almost a pro for freshwater rather than saltwater because of the challenge and the effort that you are putting into catching that 2-pound bass versus the effort that you are putting into that 10-pound shark or barracuda or whatever else it is, redfish, I don't care. It's that's where I think that I'm going to say that freshwater is better than saltwater fishing. Now, I am definitely biased because I don't live near the ocean. I am only literally a half-mile walk away from where I can just, fish for bass and catfish and bluegill and crappie, right? It's completely different, but I still think that after going saltwater fishing, having a lot of experience in freshwater fishing, I believe that, freshwater fishing, because of the challenge of it, because of all that goes into freshwater fishing versus saltwater fishing, I feel like the satisfaction and the fun of catching freshwater fish is greater than saltwater fishing. Saltwater fishing is fun. I like saltwater fishing. If I lived near the ocean in like Florida or somewhere where I could go both, I would go both, But I feel like saltwater fishing just doesn't have enough of a challenge, and it's too monotonous compared to freshwater fishing. It's constantly changing with freshwater fishing, whereas saltwater fishing, yes, it does change, but the scale at which it does change is very minimum, and throwing a shrimp or throwing like a jig of some sorts will catch you so many different fish, and that is a complete difference, and that is a bad difference, and that is why freshwater fishing is better than saltwater fishing. If you guys enjoyed fishing videos, make sure to leave a like. There's more to come. There's also more hockey content and fort content coming in the near future. Hopefully it's not as big of a break as between this video and the last video. But anyways, that's all for now. Peace!